Sure.
Yeah. Do we want to go ahead and move on to another topic?
Yeah, I think so, Leon. I think
Yeah.
we that was a great conversation about that, but we've got a few interesting ones to get everybody involved. So go ahead, Leon.
Yeah. So I wanted to bring up Greta Thunberg being named Times Person of the Year. Specifically, I want to ask if like she's actually like worthy of it because most of the votes that people recommended, I think 96% of people recommended the Hong Kong protesters over her, and Time of the Year went it's with a different direction. But I want to ask Tree of Logic what she thinks of that.
Yeah, I asked someone and they couldn't answer this. I said, "Why should I give a fuck about this privileged girl?"
Oh,
Mm,
oh,
that's a take.
Oh,
oh, man.
Because the
Doris,
media
you
tells
disagree?
you to, obviously.
Well,
I had
Because
never
I
heard
do
of
believe
her.
the
I had
Hong Kong
never heard of her.
protester,
How have you not heard of her?
they're going through so much stuff over there in Hong Kong. It's like, you mean tell me you passed them up for her? Why? And she just got called out on Twitter for pretending to sit on the floor when she actually had first class seats on the ICE. You know what I'm saying? These photo ops are just ridiculous, and it makes me not like her even more.
Why do you not like her?
Why should I like her?
I mean, she seems like a little girl who wants to affect the world, wants to make change in a positive way. You don't think that's what's
She
happening?
sees that. She sees.
No?
It doesn't.
Tell me.
She doesn't
You
give that.
tell me.
She does not give me. I don't get that vibe from her.
What do you
I
get?
get that to somebody who lived a very privileged life who's going to tell me how she thinks, and based upon what her parents have taught her parents, who are washed up actors, who have used her to make millions of dollars, are going to sit up here and preach to me? Honey, she haven't even got her period yet. Probably ain't going to tell me what the fuck to do. I don't fucking know.
Oh, okay.
Imagine-
Maybe let's not go in that
thinking
direction.
Imagine thinking somebody who wasn't born with a blue chip stock that his American citizenship is somehow privileged.
Yeah.
What?
Well,
Okay,
I have to catch you out on something you said there.
Okay.
Are you implying we shouldn't be teaching climate change to our children?
No, I asked the
Not if you're
question, why
active.
should I give a fuck about this girl?
Sure.
This overprivileged girl. Why should I give a fuck about her?
Okay,
Okay.
you did make a point there that because she was like taught by her parents. I just
But
wanted to.
No. Answer my question. Why should I give a fuck about Greta Thunberg?
Because
I don't need you to love her, but you seem so mad.
I
at
just
her. Why are you
answer my
okay, Tree?
question. Why?
Yeah.
See,
Tree,
see,
her-
She's got a question, yeah.
See, you can't answer the question without going
Here.
through. Well, why about this and what about that? And she's a wonderful girl. I'm like, give me. I'm still waiting for the answer to my question.
okay, here. Lecture, did you want something? Sorry.
Oh, I mean, you guys keep going. I got stuff to say, but I can wait. You guys keep going.
Okay,
I just go ahead, Leon. I'll go after you.
I'm gonna rant for a moment.
Oh, I mean, I'm just gonna say in general that she's brought a lot of eyes onto the climate crisis. She got a lot of people out there
Still hasn't answered
protesting,
my question.
and putting her bio aside, you have to look at the result of what she's accomplished as a 16-year-old. That's pretty inspiring for young
Why
people.
should I care about her and what
Because of the
she
things
has to
because of
say?
the things that Important is talking about, right? Because she's bringing attention to an issue that needs attention.
As
Needs
if I didn't know
immediate
about the attention. And by the way, I
Well-
have somebody on Twitch who has taught me more about climate change than she. So my
But-
thing is I'm like, she's just noise. She is not teaching me nothing. She has not taught me anything.
Sure,
The only thing
Tree.
she has taught me to go is, how dare you? How dare you? How dare you? That's the only thing
Good impression.
she taught me how
Hey,
to
wait,
say.
Tree, was that a shout out to the Great Touring News?
Yes,
All right.
it is.
I
Yes,
just
it
want to
is.
drop his name
Yes,
here.
it is. Yeah, Touring News. I mean,
it really?
there it is. Touring
love
News.
him.
Believe it or not, I don't listen to a lot of lefties here, but that is one person on the left who has, and this is a huge achievement, who has actually got my ear and made me go, I'm probably need to rethink that position. And he has actually won me over on certain things, you know what I'm saying? And I'm more mindful of that. Greta has repulsed me. You know what I'm saying?
Why should I give a fuck
And-
about touring news?
Why-
He's a
why are you
white
so
guy
negative
who
towards
drives
the child?
a
Here's the thing. Here's the thing.
And he
I
had
didn't
to
ask you to
tell
give
me
a fuck.
anything.
I didn't ask you to give a fuck about touring news, did I? I did not ask you to give a fuck about it. I give a fuck about him. Okay, that's my buddy. I give a fuck about him. But
Me
my
too,
thing
I
is
love
that
him.
y'all put
does
that
anybody here
y'all
not
put
like
that
touring?
girl all over the fucking place. I can't help but see her every fucking way I turn around, and I'm saying to myself, why should I give a fuck about her? But nobody's pushing touring news on you guys. Y'all are pushing Greta on me.
Yeah, no one
I'm
asked
like,
you.
and I keep saying, like, why should I give a fuck about this chick? This little girl, by the way, this little girl.
Okay.
You're so mad. You push touring news on us. Nobody asked you about touring. I love it.
I
too,
did
but nobody
not.
asked.
No. How did I push them? How did I push
You
touring news on
said, I got a friend on Twitch who taught me way
And
much
how the
more.
fuck did that have anything to do with you? How did I push that on you? I gave you my example. I gave you my. You are basically deflecting, and I told you I'm giving you my experience. How the fuck is your experience my experience? I gave you my experience. I said me. I said me when I touring. I didn't put you in the equation, boo.
But your experience,
I said
correct me if I'm wrong, is a
experience.
reason
So
why we should
how
give a
does my
fuck.
experience have anything to do with you? So don't lie and say I pushed him on you. I did not. But guess what? Everybody's pushing to Greta on me.
But I mean,
So-
you're asking like, and correct me here if I'm wrong at all. You're asking why you should give a fuck, and you like not pushing touring news, but you're talking about touring news, and it's based on your experience with touring news. Other people have an experience here with Greta Thunberg. They were
But I'm
trying to
not
share,
pushing
and you're
touring
still
news.
saying.
And as a matter of fact, hold on. Let's be honest. I didn't even mention his name, but Steve mentioned his name. Did he not? I said I got somebody who
Did you
already.
just call Steve? Ooh.
He mentioned his name. By the way, I don't mind. I think people should really check him out. He's a really good YouTuber. He's a
Yes,
really
he
good
is.
Twitch streamer. He's really
Yeah, we
good.
shouted him. We
Yeah,
shouted
he's
him.
getting way more
That's
shout
why
outs than
I
any of us
mentioned
are
that.
right
I-
now.
But listen,
great.
I was selfishly trying to keep him to myself, and I
Aw.
wasn't trying to share him. But Bastiat, am I pronouncing your name?
No, my name is Bastiat. That's
Bastiat basically, revealed my secret. Okay,
Yeah.
so
And I-
therefore,
Crushing.
you can't
Yeah,
even sit
that's
up here
why I
and say that
revealed
I am
Mhm.
pushing him on you or anyone else because I'm
Yeah.
trying to keep him to myself.
Yeah. No, I'm
But I-
pushing him, and I enjoy watching touring news, even though he kind of low key suggested that my job in fossil fuels is killing people. I nevertheless super. I think he's super. Like he is super. He's great. So yeah, definitely check him out.
I just don't. I fail to see how it's a problem if because I think that if you have a point and if you have an experience that's personal with touring news, for instance, that we should listen to you, right? Even if it's not directly related to our experience, right? If someone
I didn't
else has
say
an
you should
opinion on
listen
Greta
to me. I didn't
Thunberg,
say you
it is
should listen
still
to me.
relevant
I
to
didn't say
you.
you should listen to me. I never said that.
No, but I'm saying we should because I'm saying you have a valid.
No,
you
I
have a
don't want you
valid-
to listen to me.
I think your perspective. I think people's opinions and their perspectives are potentially valid until proved otherwise. So I think
Alright,
you should.
so-
I would at least remain open to the potential of someone trying to open me up to something that I haven't considered before closing myself off based on whatever I experience with that person.
How about this? You guys have Greta. I get touring by myself. How about that? Can we make that deal? Are we
touring
cool?
too.
Is that
No.
Gucci?
No.
We like
Yeah,
touring.
no, it's not. I want
We're
both.
cru-
I want both.
We're crushing on him too. Come on now.
Yeah, I want both. I want
But
both.
here's my take on it. So, like Elizabeth Warren, for example, talks about the mamas and the babies, and my Aunt B came. That stuff goes over my head. My eyes hit the back of my head when she starts talking about that. But she's not talking to me. She's trying to reach a different audience. And I look at Greta, she's reaching a different audience. So maybe you're not the
Yeah.
target audience.
I'm
you know what I'm
not.
saying?
And the other thing I don't get about Greta, and maybe some other folks in here can help me with this, is even if I don't like her approach, it doesn't resonate with me at all either. But I mean, some of the feelings toward her seem to be so spiteful. I mean,
How dare you?
No, yeah,
How
no.
dare you?
look, I mean, again, I don't like that approach, Tree, that, the statement
dare
that she
you?
used. But I mean,
She
but
meets it at a
I don't
school.
understand
Just
why
because of
people
you,
are so
she's not a
personally
school.
out
How dare
together.
you?
Why are
Like
we
she's
mad
just
at her?
she honestly believes the planet is burning, which it is,
Yeah.
and she's trying to share that message with everybody. And I mean, that's not. I just don't understand the frustration, with her personally. I saw a bumper sticker in the grocery store parking lot where I buy my groceries the other day. That, you know, was
And it said, "How dare you?"
kind of insult about, you know, Greta, fuck off, Greta. I love my truck or something like that. You know, it's like what is the
Wow.
feelings, what are the feelings
Climate
about her
change.
that are
How dare
motivating
he?
people to feel so strongly like negative? You know?
Well, it's obvious why. It's because, and it's obvious what's going on
Is it
here.
obvious?
Time magazine is a left-wing
I didn't like her
publication.
before the Time
if there's-
magazine. Ever since
if
she
there-
got on
if-
stage and said, "How dare you? You took away my childhood and my education. How dare you?" I looked at the damn monitor and said, "Who the fuck does she think she's talking to?"
Tree,
I
I
mean,
am
I'm not
She's
taking
talking to
her-
the United
I'm taking the
Nations.
performance, Tree.
Wow.
That's her target
I felt
audience.
like she was being
She's serious.
condescending when she said that. You know what I'm saying? How dare you?
I love your
Well,
performance.
yeah, how dare
Can I
they?
put my 2 cents in?
The
Not
best
do
thing-
anything.
The best thing about her
Academy
was the
Award.
heavy metal that was basically dubbed to her voice, her speech. That was the best thing that ever came out of that speech, where they put heavy
Dude,
metal
You
to
need
it.
to leave that little girl alone. Jesus.
You know, I think that I honestly, if I had to pick, I would have picked the Hong Kongers as well. But you know what Time magazine is, or at least from like what I know about Time, it focuses a lot on like America, right? Greta has become like a very big point of contention here. They picked her because she's controversial, kind of, right? Like, are you gonna really like pick the Hong Kongers and be like, holy shit, like the Hong Kongers shouldn't have been on there or whatever? Like, what's gonna get a conversation starting and clicks rolling, right? If it's
Yeah,
anything,
probably
it's
true.
Greta.
Yeah, that's
So that's
I
why
mean,
she was
I
chosen.
don't know if I
think the
agree
Hong
with that.
Kong guy. I think Hong Kongers would have went way more fucking clicks. That's why people picked it. People were interested.
Time
in
magazine
people
just
who
wanted to
didn't
make
vote
China
against
mad.
it.
That's all that was. It was all.
There was
it
the
about them
most
China
interest,
butts.
though.
They
There
didn't
was the
want to
most
make
interest.
China mad.
Of course,
could be true.
That's 100%. That's
That was
100% what it
another part
was.
of it.
Does
It's the
Time
same
not
thing that
sell in
Blizzard did.
China?
It's when Blizzard fucking tucked their tail between their fucking
Yep.
knees. Right? It's the same shit with Time. They didn't want to fucking up
Exactly.
that. Right? And they'll be like, oh, it's not a person, right? But they put that in their poll. They allowed that to be a prominent answer because it is a real answer, right? And it should have
Right.
been the answer, right? In my opinion, anyway. And right,
Yeah.
they choose it, whatever. But Greta Thunberg or what? I had never heard of this chick until fucking
How have you
until
not?
Time picked her, and I'm like,
Exactly.
how is this?
Controversy
How
now,
is
you
this so?
see?
How is this so groundbreaking? How is this so relevant in an era where Hong Kong is actively fighting for its freedom? We have someone talking about climate change, which isn't going to change anything. The people who like there are the science is out there. People are being educated on it, or they actively refuse. But the issue isn't that people don't have the information. The issue is that people are actively refusing to believe in it.
Well, I
So
don't think
16-year-olds
Greta's
are not gonna
message was
change
trying to
that.
educate people. I think it was trying to push, like, hey, people in United Nations that can make, like, very important decisions. Maybe this is a global crisis you should actually be doing something about.
Yeah, Greta was talking to governments, at least for a while. I think she still is. Like, she would show up to these European Union meetings and talk specifically to like world leaders about this stuff, trying to shame them into action. And of course, with an issue like this that is so big, I mean, you definitely like that's certainly, I mean, a credit to her, right? Trying to get in front of decision makers who could maybe do something about this. And you know, Tree is just like, no, don't care.
I would say- I would-
Let it burn.
I would
Let it
say-
burn.
I
would
feel
say-
like it's just some weird circle jerk for lefty Twitter. I really feel like that's all it is. Like, and that's
Preach,
just.
preach.
Can I just?
I'm not. I hate
I
being on the
wish-
side of the right.
I
Like,
I wish you were right. I
Okay,
wish
all
the
I'm
climate
saying,
change
if
was
Hong
not
Kong
real,
was picked,
but it is. You know?
Okay, if Hong Kong was picked, our conversation would have been like, oh yeah, that's totally reasonable, right? Now, since Greta's picked, everybody is like, oh, should she have
Which
not?
means
Look at
she
the
should.
polls,
Which
look
means
at
she
that.
should.
Well,
She
Yeah.
should.
people
For this
vote.
exact reason, because I would agree with Hong Kong, but seeing
would-
the reaction
agree
of
with
certain
Hong Kong,
people.
too.
Yeah, look, I'm all Hong Kong, right? But after being on this podcast with people who are so mad at this little girl who really just wants to save the world, and maybe she's 16 and she can't do it. She's not
I'm
doing a
not
great
mad.
job. Tree.
I'm just
But,
like, I'm just confused. I'm not mad,
Really
dog. Tree's
jerking on
mad.
this little
Tree's mad,
girl
okay? But
for
I'm
not
not.
sitting on the floor of a train in Twitter circle. Jake.
She got caught up faking the funk, man. She
I
had
saw
first
that.
class
I saw
season
that.
and she want to pretend that she's suffering and striving, okay?
She literally crossed the ocean in a sailboat for this climate
A
change.
yacht, a
Yeah.
$15 million yacht. Okay, she was
Well,
on a yacht.
hey, look, I don't know about you, but I've never done anything like that. I mean, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Greta was the sail, like the girl who sailed, like that was her.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that was
agree.
her.
Yeah, like
Right.
she did that because she's trying to raise awareness of how bad for the environment
Which,
flying
if
is.
I'm not
I
mistaken,
know who
she
this
co-
is. She's a climate person now. Is that
That's what she's known for.
you didn't know who he was talking about.
How do you know
Oh,
her as
like,
the girl on a boat?
Yeah, what?
No, she's the girl on the boat. She's the boat girl. She's the boat chick.
Well,
boat shit
Dead ass.
Lecture was about to take us on an interesting spin. So, Lecture, do you
y'all
want to
brace
finish that?
yourselves, because I know this
Do it.
deal.
No, I was gonna say if there was any doubt that this was a political move, you just have to look at who they chose for athlete of the year, and the reason why this is turning people off so much is because it's been more of this. It's more of this same media establishment, governments, all trying to push this man-made global warming theory on people, and people are sick of it. And I don't even think Greta meets the standard that Time magazine itself sets for person of the year. It's supposed to be somebody who's had a lot of influence, and she's had zero influence. She's changed nobody's minds. All she's done is harden people's hearts. Nothing has changed. She's literally accomplished nothing. And it's blatantly political. It's blatantly trying to push man-made global warming theory on people. And she's done jack crap for anybody. And it clearly should have been the Hong Kong protester.
Wait,
And
wait,
I think there's no doubt
So
about that.
are you denying that
Are you
climate
denying
change is
that?
all man-made, or is it are you saying some of it is man-made and some of it is not, or are you saying it is all natural? No man-made, we have no impact on the climate.
I'd say man might have like 0.0000001% of impact.
Oh my
So
god!
let me ask you
You guys
this.
don't
Let
know
me ask you
what
this,
you're
lecture fan. What is it? What sources do you base that on that are better than, say, ExxonMobil sources that say, yeah, if we keep doing this, the Earth's going to catch fire, guys? This is bad news bears. I mean, we need to keep doing it because we make a lot of money. But where are your sources that are more on point on this than, say, ExxonMobil and the oil companies that knew this was going to happen in the 70s and 80s?
Sure, some of the top climate scientists in the world are skeptical of the man-made global warming theory, including Richard Lindzen.
No, we're saying
Primarily.
it's related. We're saying, okay, let's say that right now, let's say our general consensus here is that yes, the Earth heats and cools, but it's going in a standard that we have never seen before in history. Most likely caused through coal, through whatever we're doing to our environment. Do you think that's false? Do you think that's
Yes.
not true?
False.
True, you agree?
Actually, I believe in. I was actually a climate change denier, and no more. I actually believe that, based upon
Good.
the evidence that Touring News had presented, he basically provided some evidence which people are happy to debate about this, but I was really shocked at the studies he was showing me, at the basically presentations he was presenting to me, and it was something that was, the cause and effect in reference to emissions, and I was, this was stuff I was totally not aware of it, and like I said, it made me go back and rethink my position on climate change, and I mean, I've actually started to change my mind about it.
Let me ask you a question, Tree. Why do you think you were open to listening to touring? Because I'm sure other people have tried to present this stuff to you. Why what was it about touring that made you listen?
Touring is touring is a very unique character. First of all, I'm very fiery. I'm very confrontational. You know what I'm saying? And I
Really?
came. And I was on Demon Machine's channel, as you know, I am really important. And then he raided Touring, and so Touring was reading something in reference to Syria, and so I was like, oh, another lefty, ooh, he's getting triggered and shit like that. And so I decided to ask him a question, right? So I just wanted to see if he was going to block me or if he was going to yell at me or whatever. And he looked at so I said, what is your position? I remember the question. I said, Touring News, what is your opinion in reference to Trump pulling troops out of Syria. So he looked at my question and he said, oh, hi, Tree of Logic. And it wasn't like, no, hi, Tree of Logic. It was like, oh, hi, Tree of Logic. He said, he says, I don't know yet. I want to give you the best answer I can. So let me give some thought to it. I was like, wow, somebody's giving a thought to a fucking answer before giving it to me, and they're not giving me talking points. And so I was immediately impressed by that. And then after basically about 10, 15 minutes, he says, okay, Tree of Logic, I have my answer. I am against what Trump is doing. And then he began to give an explanation of why he felt that way. He also backed it up by citations, which is very rare on Twitch, by the way. And I was like, damn, I like this guy. And I instantly followed him, and I've been like watching his shit since then, you know what I'm saying?
Okay.
So yeah.
All right. I appreciate you sharing that. You know, it's an interesting story, you know what I mean? Touring News doing the Lord's work out here.
He's smooth. You know, to me, if you want to talk to somebody like me who's, you know, very fiery, it's going to have to take the thing about water. You know how you get sand is by water slowly breaks down the rock. Yeah, it breaks down the rock and turn it into sand. And that's, I consider that what he did with me, because I'm already on guard when I'm on Twitch. I'm ready to argue, fight, and I'm ready to do everything. But it's like when you don't bring me that energy back, it disarms me. It actually, it's like kryptonite. I'm defenseless against it.
I told you got a squishy center. I know.
Oh,
no, I do not.
Touring News. You better watch out. Some fan fiction might be incoming after that.
Wow. Put that energy out there.
To me.
Thanks a lot, Mr.
Do it, Chad. That's what I have to commission.
So yeah, no, I mean he's got a different approach, but I enjoy it for sure. So I just you know, I really I maybe Touring News can talk LCTRfan sometime, because I am really curious how you can push against the consensus of like science.
There is no consensus.
Like, there is.
The consensus
the American
is
Association for the
there.
Advancement of Science is 97% of climate scientists are
the
right on.
97% is a lie.
To the last subject, the consensus is at least as strong as it is for the fact that free trade is universal.
You were literally into science denialism here. This is dangerous stuff.
Let me try.
I want to attack this from a different angle. LCTRfan. Even if you don't think global warming is real or whatever, even if you don't think that, do you still acknowledge that there's a lot of other arguments for focusing on renewable energy?
Sure, I'm all in favor of renewable energy if it's done by the private sector and not done through a government subsidy that results in things like Solyndra.
I mean, ordinarily I'd agree, but because climate change is a fact, we need government to speed along the process. I mean, it's an existential threat. Otherwise, I'd be all for it, or all with what you're saying. Yeah, burn the coal and burn the natural gas, because if there's no environmental impact, it's cheaper and whatever. But the environmental impact is there and it's real, and I don't know how you can ignore that. I mean, I wish it wasn't real. It would simplify kind of my belief in free market capitalism a lot to be able to just say, well, green is the new red. It's all a lie. But I mean, it's not.
LCTRfan, don't you think, okay, regardless of the global warming part, what about what we were talking about, Bastiat just mentioned, the other environmental effects, right? That we know, like, our water gets polluted. Even if you don't think like global warming in general, we do know that it affects our atmosphere in the sense that it lowers our air quality, can cause like long-term cancer depending on where you're from, you know, things like that it can affect our soil negatively, affect our crops. What about all those environmental impacts that we know happen?
That's actually one of the problems that I have with the man-made global warming theory is it actually does a disservice to traditional conservationism and traditional environmentalism, to where instead of actually focusing on saving the rainforests or preserving our forests or clean air and clean water, there's this overriding obsession with pushing socialism as a way to try to cure climate change, which is what the Green New Deal is. The first three things on the Green New Deal is free college for everybody, a guaranteed government job, and free college and free healthcare for everybody. So it's clearly a ruse to push that kind of nonsense. And one of my primary disagreements with it is that it actually distracts and confuses us and gets us to not focus on actually doing what's best for the environment. And the question I'd ask Bastiat and Leon, I don't know why you're acting so surprised. Most Americans agree with me
what you're saying right now is so stupid. I can't contain myself right now.
All right, let me ask you this.
When you're going to science annihilation, this is absolutely ridiculous.
Okay, let me ask you this, Leon. Let me ask you this.
Go.
Why did the Earth's temperature go down between 1940 and 1980 at a time when CO2 temperatures or CO2 emissions were skyrocketing?
I'll be honest with you, I don't know. My PhD is in technology management. But if I wanted to find out, maybe we could look online and find out what some studies are. Maybe we can look at what NASA says. Maybe we can look at what all these organizations say.
There's no denialism.
Why is it when?
There's no denialism in saying I trust the judgment of experts in the field and the consensus of the experts.
So do I.
I don't understand gravity on a personal level, but I trust the experts.
Can I say one thing? One thing. The top mind that LCTRfan referenced, Richard Linson, who we referenced earlier when we asked for a name, is someone who's been retired for over half a decade. That's your top mind. It's someone who's been retired since 2013.
There's lots more, but he's still active in the
this global
scientific community.
I'm not sure where you're getting this notion that temperatures like cratered for 40 years, because it looks like after the Industrial Revolution, just from my look here, I mean, they really start to go up, and then in the last 50 years, like the graph is almost vertical. I mean,
no, the hockey stick graph has been proven false.
No, I mean, what do you mean by that? Who has proven it false?
What?
Everybody, the hockey stick graph.
Everybody.
That was all because they never took into account urban heat sinks, and so the hockey stick graph in Al Gore's movie has been completely proven wrong. So you don't have an answer either about why the Earth's temperatures went down between 1940 and 1980.
No, I'm rejecting your notion based on the data I'm seeing right here. The notion that the Earth's temperature went down, it fluctuated a lot during that time period, but the graph has a very clear upward slope. Absolutely. So like I don't accept that premise, and I also don't understand why it is that I guess what you're saying is that basically almost everybody's wrong, not just the socialists. Like I'll grant you, Green New Deal is totally Green New Deal seems like totally like socialism through the green door, but that doesn't mean that like environmental projects are a bad idea or that fighting climate change is a bad idea just because you're right. The Green New Deal might be absurd, but I mean, like it's not just people who are socially inclined who are down with us. I mean, it's large energy companies who have everything to lose by this, who are acknowledging that it is real and that ultimately.
Look, if you want to trust the climate scientists who have a financial incentive to say global warming is a huge problem due to their government grants, I'll trust the independent experts, and you can trust the ones that have a financial conflict of interest.
Wait, the independent experts that are also financed by like coal and oil companies? Question mark.
I mean, coal. For example,
I'm saying the ones that you should not trust are the ones that are financed by the government. That's the real conflict.
So we should trust the ones by private corporations that gain a larger incentive to.
No, independent scientists that question the theory.
Yeah, but every scientist is backed by some form of money. You don't make money from research.
Yeah,
like in 99% of cases, you make your money from grants, right? You're given grants for your research. Most of it is government funded. Yeah, that's the problem. It's like most scientists use a combination of government and non-government like grants. So most of them do take from the government. Like all pharmaceutical studies, are all pharmaceutical studies bullshit because they take money from the government? Or no,
if you actually look at the size of the man-made global warming industry, it's skyrocketed. It used to be like in the 80s and 90s, which, by the way, man-made global warming started out as a political movement by Margaret Thatcher in Britain in the 80s, which you guys probably don't know about either. But if you actually look at the growth of funding for man-made global warming theory, it's skyrocketed. It used to be like $1 million, $2 million a year. Now it's billions and billions of dollars.
Because it was
legitimized. Are you seriously dragging her holiness Margaret Thatcher, hero of freedom and free markets, who helped tear down the Berlin Wall,
Yeah, that's
and
how-
you're saying
that's how
basically
men-
she
yeah, that's how-
faked climate change, like for some political interest. She had nothing to gain. Like climate change was absolutely
She did,
antithetical
actually.
to
No,
her
she did.
entire worldview. It screws
No, wrong.
everything up if you believe in freedom.
No,
because
she did have.
it's
she
a
had great
giant
reasons.
externality that government has to do something about.
Also,
So why
pause.
wouldn't she, of all people, gin this up?
That's a good point.
Well, I can tell you.
Yeah.
Well, I have an
It's
answer.
really
though.
not
I have
that
an answer
hard.
to the question.
I
have an
wanna hear
answer to
North.
Sam's question.
Yeah. Why did she gin
Okay,
it up?
so the reason is because she was in a political battle with the union, the coal miner union.
And you're saying she brought this up to destroy coal?
That's
Because
how it got
the
started.
reason
It's been a
coal is
political
dying
movement.
is
That's
not
how
because
the theory got
it's-
started.
Yeah, the reason coal is dying both in the 80s in Great Britain and today in the United States, the reason it's dying is because natural gas is so much more efficient and government subsidized coal mining
That's got
is
nothing to do. That's got nothing to
uneconomical.
do with.
So this
that's got
idea that
nothing to
she
do with the
needed to
fact-
gin this up to fight coal mines, I mean, she
It wasn't coal mines. That's not what I said. I said it was the
You're
unions.
saying it was in a battle with the unions and coal. She was engaged in
That's how it
climate change
started.
advocacy long after she was out of office. So like this notion that it was some temporary expedient to defeat unions in Britain, I mean, there's no basis for that at all.
That's how it got started.
Yo, North, you
Does
had
it
a.
really matter how
It
it
seemed
got started
like
if
you had
it's true?
an approach.
I have an
No,
answer. I have an answer to the local cooling. Okay, so in reference to the local cooling present between 1940 and 1972, I believe. 1940, 1970-ish, just as a general.
So you
just as a
okay? So
general
we're
era.
finally at least admitting that I was right, that the
No,
temperatures
no,
did
you
go
are right.
down
You are
between
100% right.
1940 and
You are
1980.
100% right. There was a local
Nailed it.
sort of dip
Whoosh.
in the temperatures. I didn't say that wasn't true.
Hey, can you
It
drop?
was
Yeah,
because
can you
of-
send me this? I want to see
Yeah.
this.
So
Yeah, I
it's
wanna
I'm
see.
educating
It's
you
from-
guys on science.
it's from a it's from a random. It's just like I googled it.
Okay,
And
answer
it
the
was
question.
okay. Sulfate aerosols. Sulfate aerosols were banned in the Clean Air Act of the Clean Air Acts like in the
about
late 70s or mid 70s, and sulfate aerosols, which is evidenced by the eruption of Mount
skepticalscience.com, right?
Ogang in 1963, produced aerosols which cooled the lower atmosphere by half a degree Celsius. So like just like one eruption of sulfates caused the entire like lower atmosphere around it to lower by 0.5, and we were aggressively using sulfate aerosols in the aftermath of World War II. So but from the aftermath of World War II into the Clean Air Acts, there was a local cooling effect because of these sulfate aerosols, which have a
Right.
whole fucking
That's-
litany of things that
which
that
is-
they cause that are bad, right? So
Which is,
obviously
I
we don't
love
have-
that. It's so preposterous to say man-made CO2 emissions were causing these skyrocketing temperatures, and the only thing that caused this sort of temporary reduction was other man-made things like
Well, I mean,
everything
when-
man does
when the
control. The
explosion of
sun doesn't
one-
have any impact on the climate. No, it's not the sun. It's all just man-made this and man-made that. Let me ask you guys this. Considering that climate change predictions are 0 for 41, they've been making predictions for 50 years and 40 years, and they've been wrong 41 times in a row. Why do you guys believe the 42nd prediction?
What do you mean they've been wrong like 40 seconds?
He's talking about the rate of change.
Yeah,
There-
can you
there-
send us a
there's-
slide on
Bastiat,
this
you're
or
muted.
something?
I don't know. if
Do you guys not know that every man-made global warming prediction has been wrong?
Not every.
But made by whom? NASA?
Well, let's start with the United Nations Interpanel on Climate Change. For one, in 1989, predicted that entire nations would be underwater by the year 2000 if we didn't stop man-made global warming. You guys don't know any of this stuff. It's incredible.
You don't think that we've actually have, passed laws from here to then that have tried to reduce at least carbon in the United States little by little?
CO2
Also, we only had
emissions
$1
have
million.
skyrocketed since
We only had $1
1989.
million in our research back then, according to you. So I mean, like the research obviously was pretty fucking shoddy back then when we had pennies to the dollar of what we have.
Still
now.
pretty shoddy. Still pretty shoddy.
I mean, right? So we should put more money into it. I agree. I'm with you on it.
Okay,
No,
all right,
you guys
hold
are
on
saying
a
you
minute.
guys are saying it's a
Clearly, if people
consensus.
aren't-
Why? Let me ask you guys this then. If you guys don't have an answer for why the predictions have been wrong, let me ask you this: why do we need billions and billions and billions of dollars if the science is settled and it's consensus and we already know?
We
Because
need
even
billions
if
of dollars,
consensus
one,
comes-
Yeah, why would we
apparently to
invest
convince
money?
those who are still not convinced that this is happening, and two, for a crash program on renewables and nuclear energy to deal with climate change. Yeah, it's going to be very expensive.
No, I'm
to-
talking
to
about
address.
funding for climate researchers who say man-made global warming is a huge problem.
Well, I mean, naturally, if you're going to be spending a lot of money on any program, you're going to want to back it up with good research. But I've got a source here from Forbes with charts and with data, thanks to our friends from the Surfs TV. Thanks for this. That says this was a paper published in 1967 that said, according to our estimate, a doubling of the CO2 content in the atmosphere has the effect of raising the temperature of the atmosphere by about 2 degrees centigrade. And sure enough, since that time, that is what has panned out. I'll drop this link in the chat if anybody wants to check it out. I'm going to drop it in the Discord we're talking about and in the group chat, so you can see
You
it.
didn't know that,
if you
did
want.
you, lecture fan? You didn't know that.
I'll drop this
really
here.
personal.
Check it out.
It feels
There's
so
one.
personal. It's like you didn't know. Like, okay, I didn't. I just wanted to say that I've watched Lecture Fan stream, and I actually have asked him about climate change before, and I shouldn't say I appreciate, but I've heard the perspective, and I think it's important to listen to perspectives of others. North earlier was going to say something, and he got sort of trampled. But you were going to make an appeal to Lecture Fan that like possibly no one had yet, or there was like a way you were going to convince him. I just want to hear like other, like how do we look? Maybe Lecture Fan's right, but if he's not, and there's some value in convincing people of climate change who are pretty stubborn. Did you have a tactic or an idea that you think could spark?
Well.
No, I was talking to North Mage specifically.
Yeah,
he was going to say something. It's been a while. Sorry.
I forget what I was going to say.
Sorry for asking.
I did
so
have
late.
something lined up, but yeah, no, I can't remember what it was.
Yeah,
Because
sorry
it was
for
something specific, but now I'm going to sit here and be angry that I can't remember it for half an hour.
It'll come back to you.
Okay.
It'll
It'll
come
come
back.
back to you.
Well, I have some things, right? I mean, here you're saying, oh no, we should only do it for like, we should only do it through the free market. But when we have externalities that we at least see affecting local populations really badly, I think that's one of the few times the government's supposed to step in and be like, whoa, we can't just let you poison waterways of civilians living in the States who use this water, who drink it, who can be really fucked up because you're just like wasting your chemicals through here or dumping them through here, right? I think that's a very reasonable stance. I think it's a reasonable stance to be like, well, with places that have like really high amounts of CO2, you have higher rates of asthma, you have a higher chance of getting lung cancer and other diseases. So yeah, we should try to lower carbon emissions through that, right? This isn't just a thing about like any luxury good. It's a thing that we know, even if you don't believe in global warming, we know that at least in the local environmental level, these actions really do impact the local populace there and can lead to like really bad long-term negative changes there for people, right?
That's not from CO2 though. That's from the other things that are associated with the same type of industries that produce CO2. In fact, the co-founder of Greenpeace has started a CO2 is life group because CO2 is actually one of the most wonderful things on Earth. It's the building block of life. Plants need CO2 to actually grow, and so there's been times
CO2 is bad though, right? Just like anything else.
CO2
like,
is good.
Too much
CO2
of it.
This is so good. Like literally energy companies put out movies in the early 80s about this issue called like the greening of the earth, where they made the same argument back when they had the information internally that climate change was happening, but were trying to say externally that it wasn't happening. So like, yeah, that argument that CO2 like will make the earth blossom. I mean, it is just so simplistic.
Go to China.
It is so simplistic. The deoxygenation of the oceans, for example, that has happened as a result of the increase in CO2 in the atmosphere and the consequent warming of the planet is like ruining ecosystems. We're going to see serious collapses of our oceanic ecosystems in the decades to come, and it's going to be tragic. It's already going on. You can see it in the bleaching of coral reefs all over the world. The Great Barrier Reef being one of the most tragic examples. Like this stuff is happening, and the people who did it know it is happening.
No, if you think CO2 is good, go to fucking China. There's a reason why people in China and India wear masks, right? Like,
yeah, no, I mean,
there's a very real reason for that. Because too much CO2 is bad.
It's not from the CO2. It's from actual pollution. It's not from the CO2.
It's not from the CO2.
Okay.
Can I read off a prediction right now I found? So here's a prediction. This is an interview with the Associated Press from a United Nations official from 1989, which I'm assuming is what you're talking about, right?
Yep, that's the one. Yep,
yeah,
the 1989 UN IPCC predictions.
Yeah, looking at it right now. Says entire
nations
could be wiped off the face of the earth by rising sea levels if the global warming trend is not reversed by the year 2000. That's not stating they'll be underwater by 2000. They're just saying this is going to start happening if we haven't reversed it by 2000.
No, that's not what they meant.
That is absolute. You're a lawyer. Don't give me this crap.
You can actually look at the actual report. The UN report from 1989 is like 300, 400 pages long. It's full of these doomsday predictions and there's so many of them. There's literally 41 different man-made global warming predictions that have all been proven false. And so I don't understand why you guys still believe this stuff.
You're easily misrepresenting what's being said here.
Lecture fan got one point earlier that I think is worth noting, which is, and then I'll let you go on
go
that.
ahead.
One point here, which is that coal interests, as far as I know, are really the only energy interests that are still actively fighting tooth and nail against climate change, because coal is so uneconomical now compared to basically natural gas and renewables, that all the coal industry has basically left is to fight against any kind of government regulation it can. It's desperate. And so, yeah, that's why people like President Trump's allies in the coal industry are still fighting climate change. Most of the energy industry has acknowledged that it is real. Even the companies, again, like ExxonMobil, for example, that originally were actively pushing against it in the 80s. So like that's who's bankrolling as far as I can see.
If the fossil fuel industries say it's true, then it must be true, I guess.
Look, again, they were the ones that first of all were trying to cover up its existence after internally recognizing that it was real. So I mean, I don't know at this point, like where were those internal memos faked for some political purpose? I mean, that they were entirely focused on profit and nevertheless coming to the same conclusions that people are arguing for today, that this is a real threat.
If that's true, then why did the climate researchers have been proven to be faking the global warming numbers in the ClimateGate scandal, where emails were exposed and they were literally shown to have been falsifying the numbers? I mean, it's undisputed.
You found like one corrupt study. I mean,
no, there's tons of them.
I mean, that's like saying that vaccines, must cause autism because the one study that, again, had fake numbers and was faked to like look that way. I mean, yeah, sometimes there are bad actors in science, but I don't think that undermines the scientific consensus as a whole.
Lecture, do I dare ask your thoughts on vaccines?
Yes, ask.
Well,
one thing at a time. Because actually, I have a different appeal. Do you disagree with? Like, do you fundamentally disagree with the science behind CO2 being able to absorb and re-emit infrared radiation? Do you disagree?
No. Here's the thing. I believe in science. One of the reasons that I don't believe in man-made global warming is because I love science and I've spent a lot of time researching these issues. Nobody disputes the greenhouse gas effect and that CO2, how the greenhouse effect works, and the rays bouncing and then bouncing back up and hitting CO2. Nobody disputes that aspect of it. It's all about how much of the Earth's changes in temperatures are driven by man and how much are driven by natural cycles. I mean, the climate is one of the most complex systems known to man, and we do not understand it entirely. There are ocean currents and ocean cycles that go on 1,000+ year cycles that we do not understand. And anybody that's fair-minded and not bought and paid for by these government grants, that's fair-minded, that looks at this, will admit to you that this is an incredibly complex system. We do not understand it. And this idea, and one of the reasons I'm so skeptical of all you people that believe in this stuff is because you're saying that we understand one of the most complex things known to man. We understand it perfectly.
We're not saying we understand it perfectly.
The consensus is settled, and we have to implement these far-left, hard-left policies to fix it.
Why are these far-left?
But the consensus is not that we understand everything. The consensus is not that we have a perfect understanding. I agree completely with that. It is a very complex system that is very difficult to understand in all of its entirety, right? The ocean cycles, right? The natural warming and cooling of the globe, like that happens, and we're not fully aware of it. Other things that we might introduce into the atmosphere, right? We're not fully aware of the portrait that we paint. However, to say that, right, like when we understand the greenhouse effect, we're dumping however many billions of tons of CO2 into the atmosphere, there is consensus that makes things hotter. That's the only consensus there is. There's no consensus outside of that.
Can I ask a question?
The dumping of those chemicals is causing the globe to warm because the atmosphere traps more heat. Pure and simple.
I want to hear
consensus
Tree
on that.
Yeah, Tree, go ahead.
Because I'm still learning. I just wanted to know, like, there are icebergs that are disappearing, and it's never happened before. Can you, all those of you who are more knowledgeable about this, can you tell me why that's happening?
Sorry, can you say it again?
There are icebergs that are disappearing, and it's the fact that they have been there for centuries, them totally melting away. It has never happened before. So basically, I just wanted to know why. Can somebody explain why is that happening now?
Are you suggesting that they never melted during the medieval warm period or the Holocene maximum?
From what I'm being told, no, it has not been that way. The scientists have.
Okay, why did the icebergs not melt during
you
the
can't.
medieval
I'm
warm
a
period?
student. I don't know. I'm here.
Well, you
to
just
learn.
said it's never happened before.
They're
so you
saying that
obviously
it
do
never
know.
happened before.
I think some
I
of the
said they said it. I'm repeating what they're fucking saying.
like you can
Oh,
see the
okay,
warming
okay.
temperatures in the way that the ice caps are shrinking on a year-to-year basis over the last like 60 years, the way that ice shelves in Antarctica are collapsing. So like you're right that like icebergs I guess have melted in the past, but like the scale of what's going on is unprecedented.
They have melted in the past.
I mean, I'm sure icebergs have broken off and sailed north and melted in the past. I mean, that, but what I'm talking about is like the notion of like the scale of the melting that's going on now and the degree of like collapse of ice shelves that's going on now is what's unprecedented. And let me ask you this, lecture fan. So do you believe that like the hole in the ozone was man-made, or is that also like a natural thing?
I haven't really. I've barely looked into that. But
because I feel like if the notion is human beings really can't cause climatic change, I mean that right there is an example that the consensus for that being human cause is even greater. And right there, people banded together.
Thing.
That is definitely a climate thing. I mean, the ozone has huge climatic impacts. The hole in the ozone, therefore, had them as well. I mean, that was a literal example in the 20th century of not only a problem being caused by human activity, but the problem being gradually rolled back by the reduction in that human activity.
Well, that I just don't think you can compare a tiny piece of the ozone, which is a tiny piece of just the atmosphere, to the entire climate, including all of the oceans and everything else. And furthermore, to talk about this glacier, the icebergs melting and stuff, so much of that has been just hyped up beyond all recognition, and so much misinformation out there. Well, they'll take pictures of glaciers in the summertime and then compare it to pictures of glaciers from 1910 that were taken in the winter. It's hilarious. In Montana, I follow Glacier. I follow Glacier National Park news, and so actually, Glacier National Park had like whatever those like panels that you can walk up to when you're in Glacier National Park, and those panels literally were telling people that visited Glacier National Park here in Northwest Montana that the glaciers in Glacier National Park were going to be gone by 2020. And guess what? Just this year they changed those, because guess what? The glaciers in Glacier National Park are not gone.
Well, it's a good thing they're not gone, because glaciers in the rest of the continental United States, to the extent they ever existed, are gone. And glaciers in lots of parts of the world have seen serious retreat. And I guess you can say that all the pictures have been, since 1850 have been faked. But I don't think that's true. I guess I don't know that you're saying that, but like the notion that all of this information is like either faked or twisted in some way to be misrepresented. I mean, I just don't. I don't think that's fair to say at all.
Well, the scientists that I've listened to and studied suggest that a lot of the man-made global warming science is bad science. It's manipulated. It's not very rigorous. It way overstates the evidence that they found, and it makes perfect sense because those people have a financial incentive.
The people have a financial incentive to lie too. There's no winning here.
Every form of science has a form of financial incentive when it's backed by grants. I assure you that both sides of this are backed by grants. They need findings that are
all right. So if we're
support what they want to continue.
If we're all willing to not attack either side's scientists because of where their funding comes from.
But you look at the science itself. You look at the science itself. You look at what CO2 does. You look at what CO2 does, and them saying, okay, there's no effect when we are dumping billions of tons of a chemical that fucking increases the amount of heat that we trap in the atmosphere, and saying, well, there's probably no effect on the atmosphere.
Yeah, especially when you were claiming that it's like it's good for plants, which I mean, I guess, but I mean, how can it have a positive global effect and yet the negatives of it? Well, that's impossible.
I guess my question would be lecture.
Well, I'm saying I mean, if you literally do studies where you actually have like contained atmospheres and grow two plants, the exact same plants in the exact same sort of controlled environments, and one of those environments has higher CO2, that plant will grow very much faster. And that's undisputed. I mean, I've got a fish tank and I have aquatic plants, and one of the things that you do as an aquatic plant gardener is you actually get CO2 in pressurized containers, and you actually put CO2 into your water, and it helps your plants grow. This is not like up for debate that CO2
what kind
is
of
good for
marijuana?
plants.
What kind of marijuana are you growing there, lecture?
I don't think marijuana grows underwater, does it?
Well, they do have hydroponics, right?
Yeah,
I don't know.
hydroponics.
He's
I
too
don't know
much
anybody growing
professional.
plants like that.
So, lecture, I wanted to ask lecture a question if I can, Bastiat.
Yeah.
So I've been to your stream a couple of times and we've had this conversation. And I usually just listen. I don't speak because my climate change research, like Tree was saying earlier, it's just I'm a student and I'm trying to absorb
Yeah, we're just
information.
trying to learn.
Oh, that's cool.
Yep. And a lot of the research seems to support the position that I'm under. It makes the most sense to me, so I'll subscribe to it. But let's like if I were to concede that there's some validity to what you're saying, and you were to concede to the other side, I mean, like, what is the risk, right? So if we say that the climate is changing and we take this action to resolve it, I mean, what do we stand to lose? Because if you're wrong, right?
Oh, good question.
There's serious fucking problems. No, I mean, it could be cataclysmic if you're wrong, but if you're right, what? All this funding.
Well, no, I think, Andre, that's one of the reasons that I'm skeptical of the man-made global warming theory is that it's been politicized by the left. The left has taken what is supposed to be a scientific thing and they've politicized it, and they're using it to produce push their far left policies. And
Why hasn't it been politicized
let's take
by
the
the
Green
right?
New Deal. Let's talk about the Green New Deal, for example,
Sure.
because that's the primary policy. It's a horrific, it'll destroy the American economy. And so you're saying, hey, let's just do it because it'll be, it'll be.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean,
It
lecture
would be
fans
severely bad for the so your idea that let's just do it because even if we're wrong, it'll still be no. It would be terrible to go forward with these leftist policy proposals.
Just because a bunch of commies proposed a bad idea in the form of the Green New Deal doesn't mean that like the idea of climate change is invalidated or proven to be a political sham any more than like veganism because it had some adherents among the Nazis is some kind of terrible idea. Because it had some bad adherents. I mean, obviously, I'm not down with the Green New Deal, but I mean, I don't think you have to.
Nice.
I think you can reject the Green New Deal as bad policy while nevertheless recognizing that human beings are causing climate change.
I think when I was in your stream, we even had this concession that like if we're making changes to make the world a better place, there's nothing wrong with that, right? Even if we reject the Green New Deal, which I like, and maybe that makes me a filthy socialist, but even if we reject the Green New Deal, right? Like we still can acknowledge that there's a risk here, right? If you're wrong, because again, I think that's something that I think we all have to do, right? When we say, like you said earlier, climate is a complicated issue and we can't be certain, right? None of us can be. So, I mean, wouldn't it make more sense to err on the side of caution, or?
Well,
I don't think so, because I think the costs of, and if people have other policy proposals to do with, I bring up the Green New Deal because that's the primary one that's been proposed.
Sure.
But no, I think on the substance, it's terrible and it's way too costly. Even if we're all going to die, I guess if we're all going to die in 10 years, then it's okay.
Whoa. So here's the thing.
Like seriously, if we're all going to die in 10 years, then I would say.
No, but what about the Paris Climate Agreement? I don't think that the Green New Deal is like the major proposal. I think the Paris Climate Agreement is one that stands far more like universally, like sort of there's a more universal consensus around the Paris Agreement. Do you disagree with the tenets of the Paris Agreement if we're being cautious? And
I do disagree with primarily because it's not fair to the United States, and it requires the United States to pay all this money and do all this stuff, and it doesn't have the same requirements on developing countries, which frankly I think is honestly one of the reasons that the global warming fanatics are a little bit, I guess, misguided, is because here's all these rich Westerners in these rich developed countries trying to tell people in Africa and people in Asia that no, you can't build any power plants, no, you can't develop, no, you can't drive cars, it's going to hurt the climate, and it's quite unfair.
Are you aware of the way in which so here's my perspective that I'll try and that I'll try and share with you. The reason why I think that is prevalent, right, like in terms of the United States and the developed countries having to, sort of pay more, contribute more, is because of the process of industrialization for a country doesn't involve you directly going to renewable energy. Renewable energy is expensive. No one's disagreeing with that, especially in its current state. It's not economically viable. And your entire point, correct me if I'm wrong, was that you need those, like you want it to be through free market initiatives. Right now, if we're saying it can't be through free market initiatives, we have to have the people who can pay for these things, the rich, to pay for these things, right? So it has to be the developed countries who take the majority of the burden over these developing countries that don't have the economic viability to sustain themselves through renewable resources with their current wealth. I think that's
sure. I understand that. I understand.
That's fair. I get that. If that's the case, and where we're currently headed, potentially, right? If you just accept the hypothetical that we will, like the Earth will head to catastrophe, say in 100 years, if we don't right our course, then if we're on the erring on the side of caution. No, but let's say 100 years, right?
It's
12 years, I think, before certain irreversible change.
After that, it'll be something else, right? But say in 100 years, we'll start to experience like intense global catastrophic events, right? Yeah. Wouldn't it be worth it to err on the side of caution now and shirk some economic issues for the sake of furthering potentially the entire human race? Is that not a fair trade, right? Taking some bad trade deals so we don't all die.
Yeah, if we're all gonna die, then sure, we can do whatever. It doesn't matter. We're all gonna die. But
no, that's the problem, though. It's the problem.
We don't want to die.
It's not that we're all going to die. It's life's going to get much more difficult, expensive, and difficult, and some people are going to die. But for the most part, we're going to live in a world that is going to be considerably more barren. A lot of people will die.
Saying forever.
Most American, probably very few people in America will by comparison, but life is going to be much more difficult. The earth is going to be much more barren. It's going to be much more difficult to sustain the kind of agriculture we sustain today. The world is going to be a much more difficult and less hospitable place. So you don't have to say the entire planet is going to die. Human beings are going to go extinct. There are going to be serious consequences all over the world. Right. And the question is do we deal with them?
Apocalypse, right?
Yeah.
The global catastrophic event is these lesser populations getting killed off. It is the barrenness of the earth increasing.
Yeah, and it's do we try to deal with them now while it's cheaper, or in 2050 or 2100, do we deal with them then when it is when it is considerably harder to do so because we've added that much more CO2 to the atmosphere and caused that much more destruction to the planet. And one other thing to say, if we don't deal with this stuff now, we're going to end up with some real strange solutions down the line when it gets much more difficult. There are already talks about pumping silver nitrate into the atmosphere to ameliorate some of the effects of climate change, which would be a pretty cheap and simple thing to do. And yet, while that would cool the planet, nobody has any idea about what kind of effects it would have on the rest of the world's ecosystems. So if we don't deal with this stuff now in more conventional fashions, the solutions are going to get more and more extreme too.
Wow, I guess I just have more faith in technological progress and the free markets than you do, Bastiat, because there's no reason
he's calling you a pussy.
Oh,
there's no reason.
Okay, that basically is calling me one in my world.
I knew you would. I knew that would. No, I knew that would. I knew that would strike deep, cut deep. So, but no, so hold on. The primary problem with all of these questions is they're all premised on this assumption that the 40-second prediction about all of these terrible things that's going to happen is going to be
true.
Right.
Stop saying that.
Be wrong. And but more importantly, I really do think that technological I'm all in favor of green energy. I don't like windmills because they look terrible, and especially in a place like Montana, I think they're awful. But I'm all in favor of solar energy and do all these things if it's economically viable, if it makes sense. And I do have confidence that as time goes on, we will develop these other sources of energy, and it'll be a wonderful thing. And there's absolutely no reason to start implementing all of these insane policy proposals right now based on some assumption about, oh my gosh, we're all going to die if we don't do it in 12 years. It's complete fear-mongering BS. And here's the other thing. If you guys actually had all of the science and all of the data and everything on your side, then you guys wouldn't be trying to shut down all of the debate. You would actually, real scientific theories welcome the questioning. Welcome the debate. Trying to shut down the debate and trying to say, you can't just, oh my gosh, you're a denier, you can't deny this. Oh my
I want to talk. we shut down anti-vaxxers all the time, right? And because the problem is, even if you have a shit ton of science on your side, in a lot of places, once you start entertaining this topic, you have a few people who are like, I don't know, worried parents, for example, who are like, oh, maybe there's some truth to that, and then start doing like insane things in regards to it because they don't have all the data. So it makes sense for a lot of people to shut down the debate. But anyways, LCTRfan, regardless of that, I'm just kind of upset because here we were earlier talking about China and talking about wanting to stop, well, not exactly completely stop trade, but wanting to like hurt them economically, right? Because what they're doing is like really fucked up. And don't you think that there's an argument for that to be made in renewable energy as well? Like, Europe can't even put sanctions on Russia when they try to invade Crimea because they threatened to like shut down their natural gas, right? Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, they get away with a fuck ton of like really fucked up shit because they get to sell their oil so freaking damn cheap. If we have renewable energy and if we accelerate that process, we take away the power from those really like strong nations kind of permanently.
Okay, here's the problem with
that. I'm dying of smoke inhalation
because
Pxie is on fire right now.
I don't agree with Bastiat and Pxie thinking that it's the job of the government to be a bunch of venture capitalists and take taxpayer money and start venture capitalized investing in renewable energies. I think we ought to have freedom and allow people to invest their money where they want. There's no reason for the government to become a bunch of venture capitalists and start investing in renewable energy because you think it's a great business decision.
Wait, so you don't think that the government should involve itself with China at all then in that sense, right? Like, here they are like meddling economically, being like, venture capitalists if they interfere with other nations and try to pull them up to fight against China, economically speaking. Like, since that's not the government, I just don't understand how you can hold these two points of view.
Well, I actually, if that was your reasoning for saying that the U.S. should invest in renewable energies, that is more susceptible to convincing me than saying we're all going to die in 12 years if we don't do it. However, I think the real issue
No, I want you to say it's not true. You keep lying. I want you to sit here and say it's not true to us right now.
Yeah,
I don't want you to continue until you admit that. Because I'm tired of sitting here and listening.
You guys never listened to AOC or what?
Yeah, I mean, people on Twitter
said we're gonna die in 12 years.
I'm pretty sure she has. Somebody was just questioning whether she said that Miami was going to be underwater in a few years, and she said that too. And here's the other thing. Right now, the way to deal with China, it's not to invest in renewable energy by the government. It's actually to encourage fossil fuel development, which is what we're doing under Trump, which is fantastic. America is not only energy independent now, we're actually going towards energy dominance. And I think that's the real way to go against China, is to do the exact opposite, is to unleash a fossil fuel development. And frankly,
wait, what about Russia,
one of the other things, like, so let's, if you guys are right that Miami is going to be underwater in a couple of years, why do all of the millionaires and billionaires and Barack Obama buying a house close to the beach, and all the insurance companies and banks, and why are all they not concerned about Miami being underwater in a couple of years?
It's going to be, Miami is, as far as I'm concerned, Miami is not going to go anywhere. What's going to happen is it's going to get much more expensive and unpleasant to live there. Like, you're right to the extent that there's so much property value and interest there that it's not like one day people are going to say, well, the water's risen an inch, we're all going to bail now. I mean, that's economically very difficult to do, but it's going to cost a lot more to live in places like that. It's going to be hotter and more miserable, and you're going to have to start building seawalls in vulnerable places to keep out rising tides. So, like, yeah, you're right that people aren't going to abandon those places, but it's going to get much more expensive and difficult to live in them. I mean, Miami already floods, during pretty basic rainstorms. Its infrastructure gets overwhelmed and it floods. So, like, this notion that it's not already a problem, I mean, it is a problem.
Okay, so you disagree with AOC on that too, then? That's
Look,
fine.
I have no interest in her opinions on this stuff. She seems to me to be trending toward the commie scale, trending toward the commie side of things in terms of a lot of her opinions. I'm not going to stand by her when I'm saying that climate change is nevertheless real just because AOC has a lot of bad ideas. I mean, just because she has bad ideas doesn't invalidate climate change, and to raise her as a straw man for that. I mean, climate change was a thing long before she was a part of American politics. So just because she's wrong about a lot of her ideas,
Well, I bring her up because you guys keep saying nobody says that. Nobody says that.
You're right that there are people on Twitter, for example,
opposite.
who say things like everybody's going to be dead and whatever, but that's even if AOC says it, all right, most people I don't think are saying that climate change is going to scour the earth of human life.
But you are. You basically just said it, Bastiat. You basically said we're
facing dire
consequences.
Some people are going to die as a result of climate change.
There you go.
For example, some people are. That's very different than saying everybody's going to die. That is a radically different statement. Obviously, that's a different statement. And not just human life, by the way. Not just human life, as somebody pointed out here, very importantly. Not just human life, like whole ecosystems that human life is dependent upon are also going to suffer. And a lot of species will be scoured from the planet because they won't have the ability to adapt to climate change like we will.
Let me ask you this then. How did those species and ecosystems survive the medieval warm period and the Holocene maximum, both of which were hotter than the Earth is now?
But a lot of them didn't. And the difference is those weren't caused by human beings, right? So the Earth can adapt to its own changes. It cannot adapt to our changes.
Well, that's not necessarily.
I mean, not just to be clear, it can't adapt to our changes in our lifetime, right? So things are going to, I guess eventually the Earth would adapt. But like the negative impacts are going to come at us a lot sooner than that. They didn't adapt
to those changes in the medieval era. It wasn't a long enough change across enough generations to cause proper adaptation. Mostly it just, the changes reverted, right? The warming period stopped, species died out, and then they stopped dying out when the period went. There was a time enough for acclimation, but none for actual adaptation. So there's no real argument to be made in terms of, right, like, yes, natural selection, unless this goes on for, hundreds and hundreds of years. If not,
all right. So as long as we all agree that the polar bears are going to be just fine, even if we get a little bit warmer, then we'll be good.
They might not be, right? No, and there's no going back if they die.
Yeah, nothing else says them out of that. And by the way, in terms of national security thinking, it's also worth remembering that as the ice caps melt, that's going to benefit chiefly Russia. In terms of countries that are now going to have more ports and more trade access. Russia stands, as far as I can see, is the only country that might actually benefit from climate change. Everybody else, and maybe I guess Canada, I don't know. Everybody else seems to be like they're going to be set back considerably by it. So,
well, I just want to give Lecture a little credit here. Not a little. I want to give Lecture credit. Obviously, he's got a viewpoint that is in the minority, and he's willing to come here and talk to us about it and listen. He's going to push back like any of us would. I don't think Lecture is going to walk away from even the best arguments saying you guys are right, I'm wrong. There's a lot of people out there that think like Lecture and have read what he's read. And so I appreciate Lecture coming here and speaking to us and not losing his mind. And I appreciate everyone on this panel for having a civil conversation about this. You know what I mean? Like, it might be infuriating to some people out there, but there are people out there that believe what Lecture believe, and they live amongst us, and they're our neighbors, and we want to be able to talk about this.
I think it's fascinating. I like to see Bastiat and LCTRfan because they're both lawyers going at it.
Tree of Logic. I talked to Touring News. I was like, when are you going to talk to LCTRfan? He said, I'm not debating LCTRfan until I'm prepared to beat him. He said, I'm not doing it until I've researched every shred of it. I was like, oh, shit. I was like, all right.
Well, now he knows if he sees this, now he knows all my arguments and all my questions. So I've only got a couple. I've only got a couple left. I've got a couple of other really good gotcha questions and stuff, but
change your minds to fuck over Russia,
He's the devil. Now he has all your tricks.
And think about that.
Cold War back up.
If Lecture wasn't out here giving his point of view, then someone like Turing wouldn't have the motivation to go research even further and be able to dispel even more what he believes are myths and many of us out there and challenge these points. You know what I mean? So,
what a good argument for freedom of speech.